Hello everyone and welcome back to our Into the Word series. Today we're moving on to Ephesians chapter 5 and we're going to be looking at verses 1 to 7. Follow God's example, therefore, as dearly loved children, and walk in the way of love, just as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us as a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God. But among you there must not even be a hint of sexual immorality, or of any kind of impurity or of greed, because these are improper for God's holy people. Nor should there be obscenity, foolish talk, or coarse joking, which are out of place, but rather thanksgiving. For of this you can be sure, no immoral, impure, or greedy person, such a person is an idolater, has any inheritance in the kingdom of Christ and of God. Let no one deceive you with empty words, for because of such things God's wrath comes on those who are disobedient. Therefore, do not be partners with them. Paul begins by telling us to follow God's example, or in other words, to be imitators of Christ. So often we find it easy to compare ourselves with other people, but the Bible tells us to follow God's way of living. He also says, as dearly loved children. As we grow up, we imitate our parents and the things they teach us throughout our lives. But the moment you give your life to God, that changes. You become a child of God and should follow his example. Verse 2 says we should live a life of love, just as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us. First of all, we are told to live a life of love. We should love the people around us and the people we meet in life with the same intensity as Christ's love for us, laying down our life for other people, looking out for each other and helping one another out, especially those who need us most. Then from verse 3, Paul changes to talk about conduct that isn't fit for a Christian. He tells us there should not be a hint of sexual immorality, impurity, and greed in our Christian life. Sexual immorality is the engagement in sexual acts outside of the sanctity of marriage. Impurity is allowing impure thoughts or attitudes to contaminate your relationship with Christ. And greed is having an intense desire for sexual acts. Why does Paul tell us to stay away from these things? Simply because they are wrong for God's people. They are not associated with Christians. He also mentions obscenity, foolish talk, and coarse joking as being out of place for us, which is basically anything involving filthy words or images or making joking comments about sexual matters. However, on a positive note, we are to give thanks for sex because it is a gift from God. God's purpose in giving sex is not primarily for the gratification of the individual, but for the bonding together of husband and wife in a one flesh relationship. In Paul's final verses, he talks about the consequences for us if we live in these ways. No immoral, impure, or greedy person, such a person is an idolater, has any inheritance in the kingdom of God. Paul is telling us that anyone who lives a life against Christian living is not worthy of the kingdom of God. If we are transformed by Christ, then our lifestyle should reflect Christ also. And lastly, Paul says, do not let anyone deceive you with empty words. Don't let anyone persuade you to live a life against God's example, because it is worth nothing. It is empty. God's wrath comes on those who are disobedient. Therefore, do not be partners with them. Paul isn't telling us to avoid contact with unbelievers. Jesus taught his followers to reach out to the sinners and lead them to him. But rather, he is telling us to be mindful of those who lead a bad lifestyle, as these people may be more likely to influence us for evil than we are to influence them for the good of God.